Going over my updated prediction for the 2024 United States Senate map. This is very interesting because, obviously it's the 2024 presidential election gets most of the attention between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The Senate map and the Senate elections, since it's a presidential election year, is not getting a ton of attention because obviously the news media is most concerned with the presidential election. But the Senate map is actually very, very interesting. And something's very interesting that is happening right now with the Senate election that I think deserves to be a little bit more spotlighted. And I'm going to do a little bit of that in this video today and more going forward as we get closer to election day. So the first things first I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the states which are considered safe for the incumbent senators or challenging senators at this time. For instance, the state of Wisconsin, the Democratic incumbent here, I think is going to win this state by 15% or over, which is going to be a safe Democratic state. California, Adam Schiff, the Democratic representative, who I believe won the primary in California, he will win this race against his Republican challenger. That'll be a safe state for the Democrats. Hawaii, the Democratic incumbent, will win here. I have no doubt in my mind about this. New Mexico, the Democratic incumbent here, I think will also win in a safe margin as well. The state of Utah, where there will be a new Republican candidate because Mitt Romney is not running for re-election. The Republican will win this race, though. I have no doubt in my mind about that. Wyoming will be a safe Republican state, as will North Dakota. Nebraska, I believe, has a special election this year as well, but both states are expected to be safe for the Republicans. Mississippi and Tennessee will also be safe. The state of Missouri, where Josh Hawley, the Republican senator, is up for re-election. Some polls have showed this race potentially getting a little bit closer. Until I see anything further, I'm going to keep it over 15 percentage points, giving that race to Hawley. But that might be one just to keep an eye on a little bit. But I think for right now, that race will definitely be safe for Hawley. Republicans are at 46. Democrats are at 32. Amy Klobuchar, the incumbent Democratic senator in Minnesota, is fully expected to win this race over 15 percentage points. I haven't really seen any polls showing this race to be very close. The state of Indiana is definitely going to be a safe Republican state, as well as our first flip of the night, the state of West Virginia, where incumbent Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is not running for re-election. This will be a Republican pickup with like a 99.9% guaranteed. The Democrat will lose this race, a Republican will win here. Next is the state of Virginia, where at the presidential level, Virginia is polling very, very close in the polls. At the state level, it's not really looking like too much of a contest. Tim Kaine here is leading this race by over 15 points right now. Barring some sort of surprise, I think Virginia will continue to be a safe Democratic state. Maryland, we're going to come back to because I actually think this one is a very interesting case and needs to be talked about further. Delaware will be safe. New Jersey, Bob Menendez, the senator, will not be the candidate anymore after his corruption charges that he faced and such. He will not be the candidate anymore, but that race will still be a safe Democratic state. The state of New York will also be safe Democrat, as will Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and the state of Maine. All will go Democrat. It is also worth noting that the Democrat in Maine is Senator Angus King, who is registered as an independent, but has a history of caucusing with the Democratic Party, so it's basically a Democratic seat. So right now, I think there are 42 Democratic seats we know for sure will be safe for the Democrats over 15 percentage points. Republicans have 48 seats that I believe will be over 15 percentage points for the Republicans. Now we're going into the states that I consider to be likely for both parties. Likely means the outcome of the election will be over 5 percentage points, but just under that 15% threshold to make it a safe race. It'll be under 15, but it will be over 5. So the first state I'm going to go over is the state of Maryland, where we see a retiring incumbent and two candidates. One is Democrat. I believe her last name is also Brooks, Angela also Brooks. The Republican is the former governor, Larry Hogan. And I just did a video on the state a few days ago as well, if you're interested and want to learn more about this race. Hogan is running as a more moderate Republican who has spoken up against President Trump multiple times. And he's actually seen to be polling much better in this race than initially expected. A poll from a few days ago showing it to be a single-digit race. And Maryland is an overwhelmingly Democratic state. I believe Kamala Harris was winning in that poll by well over 20 points. And yet, Hogan was only losing by about 3 or 4 points in this poll. And Maryland, I think right now, I'm putting it in the likely Democratic column. It is such an uphill battle for Hogan to try and win this state just due to the Democratic nature of Maryland. But if Hogan finds a way to even lose this race by like 10 percentage points or 8 percentage points in a state like Maryland, I think that gives a lot of credit to how he was as a governor and as a candidate and as a person to make this race so close on an election where the Senate is really 50-50 right now. It definitely says something about Hogan that this race is very close. So with that, Republicans are at 48 still. Democrats are now at 43. The first state I'm going to go to is the state of Florida, where Republican Rick Scott is running for re-election for the first time. He got elected back in 2018. This race that was decided by under 1 percentage point last time is not that close this time. Right now, I have it as about a 7 to 8 point win for Rick Scott. That'll be enough to give him a likely Republican leaning at this time. Republicans are at 49. Democrats are at 43. The state of Texas right now, Ted Cruz, there hasn't been too many polls done yet, but everything I've seen so far has Ted Cruz over 5%, under 15%, probably like a 10% margin for Ted Cruz at this time. He'll outperform his 2018 numbers, similar to Rick Scott. Probably around 10% win for Cruz or so. That gets Republicans up to 50. Democrats are at 43. This is where things get really interesting because all these states that are remaining now are the pure battleground Senate races that I am watching at this time. First things first, I'm going to start out west with Arizona and Nevada. The state of Nevada, the Democratic incumbent Jackie Rosen is leading her Republican challenger Sam Brown by 10.8% in the Real Clear Politics average. Brown has not been able to exceed 41% in any recent polls recently. This race is absolutely being run away with right now by Jackie Rosen, and so much so that I was going to put it in the lean Democratic column. It's hard for me to imagine right now it being under 5 percentage points. Maybe the polls will change in the coming weeks and days before the election, but right now I am putting this one barely in the likely column. Probably a 7 to 8% win for Rosen at this time. I don't see this race getting under 5 percentage points, at least at this moment in time. Next, we're going to go to the state of Arizona. Where Arizona right now, we have Republican Kari Lake up against Democratic Congressman challenger Ruben Gallego. This race has been very, very interesting. That Gallego, the Democrat, he does not claim to be a moderate Democrat in the way that Kirsten Sinema did or Mark Kelly did. He's just running as a normal, like, typical Democrat. And Kari Lake is running, again, like she ran 2 years ago. And this race has been a blowout for the last few weeks. All have been over 4 percentage points, except for Insider Advantage that came out very recently. But even still, I personally have my doubts about that poll even being this close. This race has been a absolute just shellacking for Gallego. He's going to win this race by over 5 points at this time. Kari Lake is probably going to lose another election in Arizona. It's just this race is so surprising that it's even this much of a blowout. But right now, Democrats are at 45, Republicans are at 50. Next, we're going to move to the state of Montana. Right now, Montana is the state that very well may decide which party controls the Senate. Because right now, there's only been 3 polls recently in the average where the Republican challenger, Tim Shee's at 48, the Democratic incumbent senator, Tester, is at 46. Or in this poll, 48-46. The other poll had Sheehy at 51, Tester 45. Rasmussen, Sheehy at 50, Tester at 43. And I think this is a race where the Republican challenger is actually favored to win, but I would not be shocked if the polls on Election Day are much closer than the polling average is. I have Sheehy winning right now under 5 percentage points in the lean Republican column. I think this is the election where Tester's luck just runs out by being on a presidential election ballot. There'll be higher voter turnout for Donald Trump. Donald Trump will win the state probably by 15 to 20 points on Election Day. It's going to be hard for Tester to win on that same ballot. I think Sheehy's going to be able to win, but by a much smaller margin than what Trump will beat Harris in this state. Democrats are at 45, Republicans are at 51. Next, we're going to move to the Rust Belt, and we're going to look firstly at the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin right now has Democratic incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin facing off against Republican challenger Eric Hovde. And right now, this race is a 6.4% lead for Baldwin. A lot of polls have shown this race to be 5 points or over, except for one recent one by the Hiller Emerson that showed it to be a 1-point race. Right now, the Hill and Emerson one is at very least worth looking at because that could be a sign that maybe this race is closer than the polls from before have suggested. The race right now, though, is Baldwin at 52 or 50, 51, 50, 52. The Hill poll is the first one to have her under 50. So that may be something to keep an eye out for. I feel pretty comfortable right now putting the state of Wisconsin into the lean Democratic column at this time. I'm not 100% buying into the fact that this race is going to be a super, super tight race, that Baldwin is in legitimate trouble of losing. But I think that Hill Emerson poll, their very reputable polling source, is enough for me to put a little bit of caution and say I don't think it's on par with Nevada or Arizona. That I would even go as far as saying I think Republicans have a better chance at winning Wisconsin than Arizona or Nevada at this time at the Senate level. And that poll is definitely one to keep an eye out for. The state of Michigan. We're going to go next door to Michigan, Wisconsin's neighbor to the east, where Democratic Congresswoman Elisa Slotkin is facing up against Republican Mike Rogers. And right now, it's been pretty consistent that Slotkin has been leading in every single poll so far in this average. The one caveat I'll say is that there is a big percentage of undecided vote in this race. It looks like Mike Rogers' support is not yet shored up yet. Elisa Slotkin's support does not seem as shored up as Kamala Harris's support is in this state. So I'm going to assign this race to Elisa Slotkin, but I do think this race is very, very close. And if there is a Republican upset in election night, Michigan might be one where I wouldn't be too surprised that it could happen. But this is definitely one to keep an eye out for because there's a lot of undecided vote remaining. But no doubt, Elisa Slotkin certainly has a narrow lead right now. I put it in the lean Democratic column under 5 percentage points. We come to the last two battleground states where we have Ohio and Pennsylvania. And I'm actually going to do Pennsylvania first because I feel much more confident in the state of Pennsylvania. Right now, incumbent Senator Bob Casey has 49.3% in the polling average. Republican Dave McCormick has 42.8%. And as crazy as this might sound, at 6.5%, I thought Bob Casey would be doing much better in this race in the polls than he actually is. Bob Casey is really a powerhouse in Pennsylvania politics. His father was in state politics, and he's been relatively polled pretty highly. But I think right now, this race is certainly favored to go to Casey. It's on that cusp of, I think, just being over 5 to 6 percentage points, which is enough for me to put Pennsylvania barely in the likely Democratic column. But I think there's a realistic possibility Pennsylvania is closer on election night than Arizona and Nevada is. And I don't know if that's a testament to how good of a candidate Dave McCormick is or how poorly Carrie Lake and Sam Brown are performing right now in the polls. But Pennsylvania, being as close as it is a little bit of a surprise for me. But I don't think Bob Casey's in much danger of losing that race at this time. So Democrats are at 48, Republicans are at 51. Next, we come to the state of Ohio. Ohio is a very interesting state, a very interesting race, where right now, Sherrod Brown, the Democratic incumbent, has 47.7%, where Bernie Moreno, the Republican, has 42.7%. This is one where there's not been much polling done, and to be quite frank, Rasmussen Reports, Fabrizio Anzalone, Remington Research, I'm not discrediting the polling sources or polling firms in this race, but I would like to see more polls, for instance, like in November from Emerson or the Hill or Emerson or Survey USA or something like that. I'm not really seeing too much information to show that this race is anything other than super close. And my rationale for this is in the 2024 presidential election, we know Ohio is going to be a Donald Trump state, probably over 10 percentage points. There hasn't been much polling data right now in Ohio, so we're essentially flying blind and trying to guess how this race is going to end up. So much so that I think the most out there prediction I'm making for this election is actually giving Ohio to Bernie Moreno, the Republican challenger. This is definitely one where the consensus among the election prediction community will probably not agree with me on this. And I think Ohio is going to be one where leading up until Election Day, Sherrod Brown will be leading in the polls. But I think there will be enough undecided vote that turns out on Election Day the polls is not accounting for, enough to put Moreno over the edge in the state of Ohio. And that will be purely because Donald Trump will beat Kamala Harris by so much in this race. It'll be enough to have a coattail effect for Moreno to barely win this race, defeating Sherrod Brown. And it's something where I could absolutely see this take either aging very terribly or very, very well. I think it's going to happen where Ohio will narrowly go for Bernie Moreno over Sherrod Brown, and Sherrod Brown will lose this election very, very narrowly as one of the strongest Democratic candidates in the state of Ohio. But it is incredibly close. Ohio can really go either way. I think I have Bernie Moreno for right now, which is a change from my prediction from last month, where I had Sherrod Brown winning the state. I now think there's a good chance Bernie Moreno may be able to pull up an upset that no one will be expecting and win this state. Right now, I have Republicans at 52. Democrats are at 48. That's how I have the Senate map at this time. And just real quickly, I could see Republicans potentially winning Wisconsin or Michigan. I could certainly see that being a possibility. I don't really see Nevada or Arizona or Pennsylvania or Maryland going for the Republicans, but I think there's a conceivable path where Republicans get 54 Senate seats if they have an absolute tremendous 2014 style night. I could see that. I could also certainly see the Democrats winning Ohio, winning Montana, getting up to 50, 51 Senate seats. I can certainly see that. I think if I am correct, if the Democrats win both of these races, it would be 50-50, and then they would have to pick off Texas or Florida as the most likely choices to get the Senate majority. A little less likely, but conceivable for sure. That'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to give this video a like and click subscribe if you liked it. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of the video, what your prediction is for the Senate map. Also, make sure to share this video with all your friends and family, and stay tuned because I'll be posting a video every single day from now until Election Day. So remember to keep watching for that. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in a future video.